Today we're going to be talking about filtering and tasks, and then also, monitors, alerts, and so forth. So, to get into that, filtering and tasks. So, of course, you guys have seen on the Uplogix local managers, our software knows how to do a bunch of different things, both for itself and also on the routers and switches that we're managing, right? So there's a this is a list of everything that's available in terms of scheduling things from the control center. So on the local manager, you might be scheduling jobs like, rebooting or updating software or turning on the out-of-band connection, right? On the other side, on the managed devices, we can schedule all of the backups, right? So the OS backups or the config backups, or even pushing files down to them if we need to update OS or update the config on a system. We can stage those files in the Uplogix and then push them down to those systems. But also things like clearing counters or the various monitors that we can run, which we'll get into more detail about that in the next section. But there are monitors we can run to run pings to monitor your interfaces, to monitor your chassis, CPU and memory and so forth. So all of that can be scheduled from the control center or on the command line. But this is mainly going to be focused on doing it on the control center. So if you want to schedule a job on an individual local manager, you just navigate in the GUI to where that is, and there's a schedule button on that page. You just click that, and it gives you a drop down with some options, right? If you're working on the local manager, these are the different jobs that are available, right? PPP, that controls the out-of-band connection. So if you're testing cellular, that might be something that you're doing, or if you need to turn them on. And then, of course, you can restart the Uplogix or import a configuration. Probably, restart is going to be the main thing that you might be working with in this section, or the PPP for out of band. When you go to schedule that, if you want to view the status of those tasks, that's in the left-hand menu. You've got the scheduled tasks, and if you click to it, it'll take you through to a page that lists all the different tasks. Now those live at the port level too. If you want to schedule jobs for those individual devices, like if you want to clear counters on a router or push a new OS update to it, you can do that on the port page. You just click through to that port and then use that same schedule task button um, to schedule those jobs. If you want to, you can also schedule jobs to happen on lots of different devices at the same time. And that's where that all lives under the schedule tab in the control center. That's where we can create filters to identify which systems we want to do work on, and then you can schedule jobs based on those filters. So the filters, like I was saying, these let you identify what you want to download your files to, or whatever the job is that you want to do. Maybe you were doing OS updates. So first we need to, identify which routers or switches we're going to be doing that job on. And so that's what the filters are for. You can make filters based on inventory group membership. You can pick out individual local manager names and add them to a list, sort of. Or you can, pick out specific devices, just onesie twosie. But we also have a feature where we can specify, device name, make, model, and OS version. And that lets us, specify, hey, we want to upgrade, maybe we're upgrading Junipers. And so we can specify Juniper for the make. We can specify, which model they're on and which OS version they're currently running. And so we can dynamically identify, which systems in our inventory, are on a certain version, and then just upgrade those particular ones. Let's see here, it looks like. So once you've got your filter made and you can preview it to see which devices it's going to target, you go back to the schedule tab, and there's a schedule task button there where you pick your filter, right, whatever that might be, and then you pick what task you're going to be scheduling. Right, you might stage a OS image and then upgrade it afterwards, or maybe you just want to get some interface monitors going or something like that. The scheduled task lets you do it on a bunch of systems at once. And for really big deployments like you guys have, that's kind of how you want to do it. You have too many, really, there's too many local managers to want to configure all this stuff one by one. Once you pick your job and the filter, then it's going to ask you, when you want that job to take place. By default, this dialog is going to schedule it for right away. So it's going to schedule it to happen immediately. But you can, if you've got a change window when you need these things to happen, or if, for whatever reason, you just want it to happen later, you can just pick a day, you can pick a time, and then you can also set these jobs to repeat or not, right? Most of these jobs, well, so the jobs like OS pushes and downloads, those by default, you only want to happen once. But the monitors, if you're monitoring an interface, the default timing on that is to repeat that job every 30 seconds so that we're continuously watching it. So just depending on the job, you might pick, different options for the time picker here. Once those tasks are scheduled, they show up under that schedule tab. There's just a list of them there. Now, you can use that search option if you need to pick out a particular one. Some of these jobs, once they complete, they'll disappear from this list. But you can then use the search option to view them. There's an option to view completed tasks there. And on any of those, if you need to, you can hold or cancel them from right there if you have an upgrade going and something's not working, so things like that. Or if certain systems haven't picked it up, you might want to do that. And also, if you click through to the description, it takes you to a detail page that's going to show you a lot more detail about which units have picked it up and their status. This is what that page looks like. If I click through on one of those, for example, this is a job that's only taking place on one Uplogix, but if it was a job targeting multiple systems, they would all appear here. In this case, this job is just setting up a network test. And then also, if you click on execution details, it's going to give you even more information about that particular job. If there are pertinent log messages, they're going to appear in that section there. So for example, we can use that filtering and schedule task system to, do mass configuration changes, right? Maybe you've got to update, AAA or TACAX IPs on a bunch of systems, right? And it's just a short bit of config. You can upload that config snippet into the control center. And then what we do is we then will push that config down to all of the edge units, right? It's going to save it in the file directory for every Uplogix where we want to push that change. And then when you schedule that push run, it's going to push that config snippet down from the Uplogix to the remote unit, and that way, if anything goes wrong, we still have that serial connectivity, and we have all of your backups of configs, so we can easily undo changes if something doesn't work right, and of course, we keep that chain of backups so that you've got all the change logging and everything. Less risky than using the network to make these changes is the idea, basically. So, this is how that would work, right? You would upload the configuration file into the control center file repository, and then build a filter to identify where you want to push that config change. The UCC uses that filter to automatically pick whatever devices match it, based on what we're seeing on the local managers. They're constantly collecting, version and stuff like that. So we have a lot of live data about what's running where. And then once the user schedules the job, then it sets up the timetable, and then that job gets kind of copied down to each local manager when they check in on their heartbeat every 30 seconds. So they'll pick up the job, each local manager individually pick it up from the control center. and then schedules it internally. If it's one of the do it right now jobs, it will go right away, but otherwise it's going to wait until it's got the right time. And I should mention here, this can trip you up if the local managers don't have synchronized time to the control center. So if you ever have a local manager that has an alarm about um, time is not synchronized with the control center, that's why we want to get that into sync, because if you schedule these jobs, you use the time on the control center. If the local manager is off significantly, then the job might not happen at the right time. So that's a big part of that to look out for. If you ever schedule a job and it doesn't seem to be going, yeah, just check to see if the local manager has the right date, because we use the calendar for that. So then, once the job executes, in this case with the config change, it's going to take that file, it's going to push it down to the uh, router switch, whatever device we're working on. And we're going to, of course, be logging what happens while that goes on, both on our side and on the pushing the image or the config side. So, we keep a log of if we've picked the job up or if it's, pending. And then also as it executes the job, we're gonna take a bunch of logs from the controls or from the local manager from that port and populate them up in there so you can see what's going on. Schedule a task, like we are saying, you just click to the local manager. And if we want to do it on the system level, you can just hit schedule here. And we're going to use outband. That's to turn on or test the out of band. And I'm just going to have it do a cycle with heartbeat. Just do a quick test, turn on the out of band, see if it can reach the control center, and then turn it back off. If I hit next, again, I could, schedule this to happen tomorrow or at midnight, but in this case, I want it to happen once right now. No need to put a repeating job on that.
So this is essentially testing the out-of-band connectivity then?
Correct, yeah. So if this had a cell modem, this would turn on the cellular modem, try to reach back and get in touch with the control center, and then turn it back off. In this case, I think these guys are set up for out of band on their secondary Ethernet. Nope, they're not. So this one's it's probably not going to be able to complete that job. Might as well go ahead because I don't believe we have any virtual, yeah, we don't have any modems set up on these guys either. But let me go ahead and we'll just turn on secondary Ethernet for everything so that it'll at least try something. So secondary Ethernet, I'm going to put that into outband mode. This is again an option that's available. We're not. It might actually, it's probably going to make me enter an IP address here. Yeah, so let's go.
Real quick, Adam, this kind of coincides with Kat wanted me to ask was the alarming capability, and I think it's a really good question. So what we want to do is I see it as two things. One is to make sure we don't lose modem connectivity. So I see that as more of an alarm feature, right? So if the modem or the LTE connection is disconnected, we want to see an alarm of that, because what I'm trying to do is prevent all these alarms coming across from, say SolarWinds or whatever. Obviously, we want node status, LM status, right, up down status. But then the question is how deep do we want to go with it, and then one of those would be the LTE and the modem connectivity, right?
Right.
So if we lose that connectivity, I envision that as an alarm, but then having the ability to set to do this function, what we're doing here, the out of band testing.
Yeah.
Is this something that we want to do on top of that alarming feature? You know what I mean? Because the alarming feature is just more or less a disconnect, right? So this is an
Right.
actual test. It's a task that we're
Mm-hmm.
wanting to do. Can we set this as like a reoccurring task? Because the reason I get at that is if there is an outage or whatever and somebody needs to get onto it, the last thing we want is to have this thing not available, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there kind of is. There's a modem monitor that we can run. It doesn't do the same end-to-end test that kind of the cellular modem does,
Okay.
because it's not IP based. But it
Right.
does let you know if the line has been disconnected or if we don't have a dial tone. So that does pretty well for the
Like
um for
detect.
the landline ones, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. For the cellular, because that gets an IP, it's a different test, which is kind of what I was just showing you there. But yeah, for the and that's a great point as long as we're talking about scheduling tasks. Oh, I'm on the wrong port. If you go to one of these guys' modems, you can actually schedule a monitor that's gonna detect when the phone line's been disconnected or things like that. We do a modem monitor, and it's this we have this one called Modem Basic, which is actually it checks for a handful of things. Like I said, if the phone line's disconnected, it'll alarm. If it doesn't have um, dial tone, it'll alarm based on that. And so that can be a really good way to, make sure that those phone lines are going to be available when you need them.
Okay.
That's our best practice that we recommend.
I
And we'll,
recall we played with the carrier or the line disconnect.
mhm.
We had that set up or we were testing that out. But yeah, anything that we can go further on that is good. So cool.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It is possible to try and do like end-to-end tests where we call into the Uplogix, but we need to set up a whole nother dial tester system for that.
Yeah.
That's yeah, got kind of a lot of parts to it.
We got a dial tester system. It's called Clear Line. We don't need that.
Right?
Yeah. We'll just try to be realist.
No, no, totally. So, yeah, just to talk a little bit more about the scheduling stuff, and we are going to get more into the monitors here in just a minute. But again, you can schedule things from here as well. Like I was saying, if we want to, we can create a filter. It looks like somebody's already made one. Um, this filter targets, well, Cisco's that are that CSR 1000V model, right? And so if we preview that filter, we can see, we've got about, because WWT was kind enough to set up about 25 of those, right? So, for example, if we look in the file archive, right, we have a universal image for them, right? A tar, pardon me. So if we want, let's say we were doing an upgrade, right? Maybe this was the upgrade image here. So you go to your scheduled task here, and we're going to do this on the Cisco, so we like that one, so we'll keep that task. So you just have to hit schedule task here, select your filter, and we're going to download. We're just going to stage that file out there. So if I hit next, this is going to be our current OS. This is what we're going to call this, and so we're going to use that image that's in the control center file archive. And then just yeah, hit next, and then we're just gonna have it download those right now. And so it's not actually pushing those to the Cisco's to the ISRs. Instead, it's just saving it to the file archive as a as the current OS image. And so if we need to, we can restore those devices using that image.
So to reiterate, that's pushing that iOS image from the UCC to that particular local manager.
Right, right. First, we download the image to the local manager to these ports, and then from there we can push it down to the actual router. So, for example, if I pick a port at random, 1.4, show directory. Um, oh, and we used our OS policies to stage that same image, but whenever it finishes copying that down, we'll also see OS current with this same image. Um, but, again, that can take a couple minutes, transferring that file. If we want to check on the status, we say, hey, okay, click through to schedule, click through to that particular job. And as you can see here, we're executing that job on all these different ports, right? As I scroll down, it's running on all 27 different ports. So it's currently moving those files. And if you go to execution details, again, currently we don't have any further logging based on that, but if it were to fail for some reason, we would get a connection timed out or something like that here. Oh, here we go. Here's our, if I go to detail log, you get even more detail. And here's our our byte count as it downloads. So we can see, how long it's been and how many bytes it's transferred so far. Um, so yeah, try and keep you informed about what's going on with that stuff, a couple different ways, just like that. Yeah, so let's go ahead and dig into, yeah, like you're saying, alerts, alarms, monitors. This is how we verify that things look good, right? Automatically. We go ahead and we have these different monitors that the Uplogix can run, and then we create alarms when we see them, alerts, as needed. And then the rules tie into that, both in creating those alerts and also, responding to them. We have two basic buckets for, you know, events that we see, right? Or, things that happen that we want to log, right? Either there are alerts, which means that there's something that we believe is a ongoing problem that probably wants attention. And then events are more like, things that it's good to log for review potentially later, but that we don't think are necessarily going to be, showstopper kind of things like user logins. So again, of course, when you log in, it's going to tell you if there are any alarms. You can always use show alarms to look at those alarms. Right? Again, if we don't see whatever caused that alarm for 2 minutes, then we start to clear it. And then after 6 minutes, if we still don't see it, then we'll go ahead and clear that alarm totally. And so it'll then disappear from the, dashboard, all that sort of stuff, as an active alarm. You can clear those, but again, if you've got an ongoing condition that's triggering that alarm, then it'll just reappear the next time we run that monitor and detect it. You have other options. You can, if you hit question mark on show alarms, you can see dash V gives you all of the, more data. So if you have like a long message, it'll display that whole thing. But also things like how many times have we seen it? When did it start? How long has it been going on? Show alarms dash all will show you not only the current alarms, but also alarms that have cleared. Um, so if you need to review, what was happening or how often has this been a problem, show alarms dash all will help with that. They all also, of course, are aggregated up to the control center. Each local manager reports its alarms during its heartbeat, and they'll all show up under the alarms tab if you want to have a complete view for the whole inventory. You can, of course, then use the search to narrow that down if you need to, or also if you want to view cleared alarms, the search includes an option for that. Of course, they can also be viewed on the local manager page. That's going to be obviously just the alarms on that local manager, but it'll be, all across the system from our summary page for the LM. Each device will also have its alarms displayed on its page. So if you click through to one of the ports, to a router or switch there, it'll show you the alarms just for that device. So if this router, for example, it looks like we lost our console connection maybe, right? Because we've got unable to communicate with device right there. That's our alarm for this router. So of course, users can be subscribed to alerts and can either get those via email or, if you want to use uh, your cell provider's text gateway, you can get SMS messages. So to configure that, basically, under your user in the control center, you just need to enter an email address or, a text gateway address if you want to get those texts. And then you can, under your user there as well, subscribe to individual local managers, devices, or even individual monitors. So maybe you only want to get alarms if a particular monitor detects a problem. You can do that. Or if you want, you can subscribe to everything on the system, Uplogix and all the ports. So it's very granular in terms of selecting which systems you'll get alerts from via email. So this is what it looks like in the control center. Again, if you click to your user or, whichever user you're administrating, there's an email address section there. And you can see I've put in my email address, but also that's my cell phone. And so what that means is that if I start to see alerts that I'm subscribed to, I start getting texts from the local managers to let me know that, in my case, I'm monitoring uptime on these systems. So if any of them ever go down, I start to get texts right away, and can then immediately move to address the problem. And this is how we'd set up, alerts for you guys as, you know, um, the modems and stuff as well. We might end up using a distribution list or something, whatever makes sense for you guys. But we would, then subscribe that to alerts, and you would, then get email notifications whenever we saw problems. Of course, the local manager has to be able to send email to be able to send those email alerts. And that can be, done just with config system email or also in the command line. Actually, this is the type of thing that you would want to set in the inventory, and then have it inherit probably, unless there was, certain systems that couldn't reach these email servers. We have the option of entering both an in-band and an out-of-band email server for that. Sometimes, for example, if you think about when the cellular modems go out of band, they might not be able to reach your internal VA mail servers. And so they might need to use a different email server when they're out of band. And that's what that feature is for. Of course, those same settings live in the control center and can be configured there. Um, so again, when you do subscribe to those alerts, this is, again, it lives under your user settings. And we have a kind of a picker where you can select your appliance, you can select the subports if you want, or system, whatever level of the system you want to get emails about. And even, like I said, you can get very granular if you only want to get interface emails about, our interface monitors, you can select that. And then there's a section for alert options that controls when you get those alerts and how often. And the default is to get them immediately and all the time. You can see in this example, for me, I've narrowed mine down to just Monday through Friday, right? Days 1 through 5. And then I only get an email every 15 minutes. So, the default, it will send you an email every time it sees the alarm. So that's every 30 seconds. So I really recommend you change that to, 5 minutes or 15 minutes so that your inbox doesn't get blown up. And then threshold, that's how many times we see the alarm before we send an alert, and that's in a row. So, if you have an interface that drops some packets just one time, even if I'm subscribed, because my threshold's set to 3, I'm not going to get an email just if there's just a little blip like that. Instead, it has to be a problem for, in this case, 3 consecutive intervals, a minute and a half, at which point then it will send me an email to let me know, and text, of course, in my case. Oh, we can also integrate with Syslog, of course. I believe that we are doing some of this maybe, where we can send all of our alarms and events to a Syslog server. You can also, in the control center, specify, if you want to, which ports should be sending those alerts along. So you can narrow it down if you want from just the whole everything down to just individual things. Same with SNMP. They can be configured to respond to SNMP polling, which is what you guys are doing. You're getting a kind of basic up down, and I think maybe uptime off of them right now, just so that if one of them ever goes offline, you've got another system that'll let you know. And then again, in the control center, we can do trap forwarding. This is where we take all of the alarms that we see in the whole control center, and then we package them up as traps and send them along to an SNMP system. So those traps, we spoof the source IP to be coming from the device in question. So for example, if I had a router that had a interface that was down, and our interface monitor was detecting that, we would then create that trap, SNMP trap. It would have a source IP from the router where we're seeing the problem. And that would go then into, your SNMP system where it would be sorted into the appropriate place based on that source IP. We also have the ability to export data off the local manager to a SCP or FTP server, right? And this will be, kind of the alarms and alerts, but also, some other stuff as well, right? Any data from our monitors, the SLV monitors, for example. And also, you can have us send the individual device configurations along to the SCP or FTP server. So it's, in a way, it's a lot like Syslog, but it has just a little, it's more data than Syslog. It's configurations and stuff as well. Created a user the other day, if y'all remember, I made myself a Thompson. And so, if I want to get email here, of course, I'm going to have an email address, right? So just add it like that, right? Hit save. And then once you have, you can go in here into alert subscriptions, and I can say, hey, on that training local manager, I want any alerts on port 39 where I was working the other day, I believe it was. And I want to get all alerts. I'm not, yep, you can narrow it down to the individual monitors, but in this case, I just want everything, any alarms on port 39, and I want them all the time and right away. Since this isn't actually going to send email, I'm not too worried about it. But you might set the frequency to a couple minutes if you prefer. So then if I look, on that training LM, let's see here, I was on, wrong port, 29. So let's go back. And just that easily, I can remove that. And we're gonna go port 29 instead. Add and save. There we go. So if we go over there to that port, right now currently we have one alarm. Current OS does not match our policy OS. That's fine. We're not gonna do anything about that. That's based on our OS policies. But we could create some alarms here probably pretty easily. If I look at the running config, I can see that Gigabit Ethernet 1 is shut down. We're not going to manipulate the interface, we're going to monitor it. So select monitor, and this will be an interface monitor. You have to specify which interface, which I thought I had that in the clipboard. 2/9, show run, and yeah. Oh no, that one's turned on. That would be one that's broken. Okay, so we give it the interface name, and we tell it we want to use, in this case, we're going to use our interface basic rule set, which monitors a whole bunch of stuff. And then if I hit next and schedule that right away, that should be scheduled and start taking a place pretty quickly. And if I want to look at the status of that, of course, I can go to the scheduled tasks and click through to the monitor I created, right? And it looks like it's actually running, no, wait, that's the modem monitor. That's the one I did previously. Sorry, here's the interface monitor. And you can see here the Uplogix hasn't picked it up yet, right? Every 30 seconds we check in for that stuff. If I refresh this page a little bit. And then of course those monitors will also show up at the port level on the CLI. If I do show monitor, you can see there it is. We have a rules monitor interface, Gigabit Ethernet, running interface basic. And if I do show alarms, this will probably tell us, yes, there we are. Operational and protocol state are down on that Ethernet interface. So now if I go back over here to the GUI, it's still waiting to hear back about that. So we're faster than the system here today. But if I click through down to that port now, I'm now seeing those alarms as well, right? Protocol and interface state are down or operational. And if this system was set up with email, it would be sending me email alerts now about that alarm. Like I said, for you guys, we're probably going to want to focus on, you guys currently have modem monitors running on your V92 modems. And so, you guys will be getting alerts about that sort of thing. Um, we might work in a separate session to actually set up some of the subscriptions and stuff, depending on, how you guys want to plan that out. But absolutely want to get that, up to, best practices standard for you guys. Of course, the monitors and rules section. So, um, these monitors, you've seen a couple running like the interface basic. Basically, we run some commands or some, something like that on a system, and then we look for certain responses, right? With the interface monitor, we're basically running show interface and we're collecting all the information out of that. The default is to run every 30 seconds. That seems like a good interval for us, and it lets us detect problems quickly. So yeah, these are all the different available monitors, right? We've talked about this a bit, but chassis monitor, that's monitoring CPU and memory. Console looks at log messages, right? That can be quite useful for detecting certain things like interfaces going up or down. The interface monitor, of course, watches those continuously. And then the ping has the router or switch run a ping, and we detect, round trip time and success or failure on that. So that's a quick little network test that we can do if you ever need to do ad hoc testing like that. We also have SLV tests that can, verify IP telephony, the availability of websites, or even just, any arbitrary TCP SYN-ACK test. Um, so rules are, they are logical statements. They're evaluations where they look at some data from the monitors and decide what to do about it, right? Each rule is pretty much a if-then statement, right? It's got some type of condition that triggers the rule. That might be an interface being shut down, or it might be, seeing a certain word in the log messages, right? And then the rule includes also some type of action to take. Now most rules, we just create an alarm based on it, but the rules engine can do lots and lots of other stuff, right? Now they have to be paired with a monitor, right? Because that's where they get the data that they're analyzing. And then of course, you can have a whole bunch of rules gathered together in what we call a rule set. That's just basically a container for them that specifies, how they should be evaluated. Should we evaluate every rule in this rule set, or should we simply wait until one of these is true and then stop? And so that lets us build in some fun logic and things like that into it. So again, monitors collect data, and if we have a rule or rule set attached to that monitor, then we're going to evaluate that data and do whatever the rules say to do. So, for example, here's some rules that monitor CPU, right? If you want to look at them in the CLI, you can just do show rule and give it the rule name or asterisk, you notice works well for the wildcard. And this rule just looks at, CPU averages, right? We have two different rules, one for a 5-minute average and one for the 1-minute average, right? Um, and you can see that they have one action. We basically send an alarm just to let you know, hey, load on this system is 90% or higher. So, do whatever you got to do. Simple monitoring, right? If you want to look at the same rules in the control center, it's under the automation section. Open that up and click on rules, and you can view the individual rules. If you just hit the little black triangle next to them, it'll open up that rule so you can view it. Or if you click the name, it'll take you through to the editor page where you can modify them if you need to. So when you want to schedule these monitors, of course, as we showed you, you can do it from the GUI, but you can also do it from the command line. If you do config monitor, it'll give you the syntax for that. We have all these different monitors available. It gives you a couple examples. So if you look at the bottom, that's me scheduling a monitor, just like we did in the GUI and the control center on the command line. It's an interface monitor. You specify which interface to monitor, and you specify which rules to use, if any. In this case, we're using that same interface basic that looks at a bunch of stuff. Once they're scheduled, if you want to look at them on the command line, show monitor will show them to you. And you can see here in this example, we have a chassis monitor, a ping monitor, and an interface monitor running. Each of them has a job number at the start there. If you look there, 9, 0, and 7. That's how we can cancel them. I'll show you that in just a moment. So for each of those monitors, if you do show ping or show interface or show chassis, it'll show us the data that's been collected. And of course, you can give it some -n and, search through it and stuff like that, just like the rest of our command line stuff. If you ever need to remove one, again, config remove job and then that number, where that number is the number of the job. So, in this example below, job 30 is a duplicate Ethernet interface monitor, right? And if we want to get rid of it, you just give it config remove job and the job number. Of course, if you schedule jobs from the control center, you can also cancel them from there. But this is the authority. Whatever's listed here on the command line is for sure what all is actually running. So yeah, here's what we collect from those interface monitors, right? If I show interface E00, basically, like I said, we're running show interface on that CLI for the router, and we just collect that stuff into our little database, right? Administrative status is up in this case. This system obviously is under no load, basically, or hardly any. That data is then, stored in a database that can be reviewed later or again can, feed our rules system. So that's just and you can see this in the Worldwide Tech Control Center. If you open up that interface basic, you'll see there's about 20 or 30 rules in there that look at all the different kind of common network errors you might see on an interface. And I won't read those all to you. But here's an example of one that's one of my favorites, line protocol status down, right? That's just one of the many rules in there. If we see that that is down, we just send an alarm based on that, right? And that protocol down, that actually is a canned alarm that's gonna correspond to a MIB in your SNMP systems. So, that'll feed that data in a nice clean way too. So yeah, like I said, together we can detect a lot of different problems with that rule set. This is my favorite because, pretty much if the cable's unplugged or somebody shuts the port, we're going to let you know right away. And if you SSH over to your Uplogix, if we go back to, the same port I've been working with, port 28, and just do a show monitors, you can see we've got those two monitors running, the chassis, which is kind of a default, and we've got that interface monitor I scheduled. You can always clear that all out with config, remove, job, and then I'm going to go ahead and just clear everything on this port. And so if we do show monitor again, you can see there are none scheduled. So at this point, let's see here. So yeah, obviously you want to make sure that you have a good connection to the system before you, try to schedule any monitors. We've pretty much tested this already, but just to verify, I can log in here, I can enable, it's gonna let me enable with that password. Oh. And so, that looks good. So chassis monitor, go ahead and just schedule one. Just do config monitor chassis. And then we'll go ahead and attach a rule to it as well. Of course, it's backing up the configuration right now. There we go. So config monitor chassis, right? validated or not, doesn't really matter too much in this case. And then if I do show monitor, of course, it's going to show up there as job 251. And then also, if you want, I can do show chassis, and that's going to show me the data that it collected on that last pass. And then, of course, when I had it running before, it's got all that data as well. So you can see there's barely any usage on this system right now. So then if we wanted to, you know, attach some rules to that, right, we can go ahead and I'm just going to use the 1 minute average. I feel like that's going to be just as good. So then I go back to my local manager and again, config monitor chassis, and then go ahead and give it that and validate it. And there we go. Same thing, show monitor, it's going to list it, but now it has that that rule attached to it. And so if this router ever gets CPU above average for 1 minute, above 90, it will start to generate an alarm based on that. You know, we can do the same thing from the GUI, of course, as well. You know, if I go back to that same system, I schedule a monitor, and this is going to be a chassis monitor with that rule. Right? Hit next. You can see it's going to start right now and run every 30 seconds by default. And there we go. That will just overwrite the existing monitor whenever it gets scheduled. Interface monitors, yeah, we kind of went over that already. Same thing. You know, you can, if you want to view the data that we're collecting off those guys, you can do show interface. And if I scroll back up, we might still have that data from that monitor I was running. I just have to remember gigabit Ethernet 1. So there we go. If I do show interface gigabit Ethernet 1, you know, here's the data from that. Admin status is down, right? Protocol status is down. 0 load, 0 input, 0 errors. Well, it actually does have input bytes, but that must have been from before. So that's where that stuff lives. You know, and again, you know, if you need to remove an individual monitor, you know, in this case, there's just that one running on this port, but I can, you know, config move job, and that's job number 253. So monitor should now be clear. So that's that. That's it for this segment.